The cold CEO Lee Jin-woo had already dismissed 9 cooks in 2 weeks, and the 10th seemed destined for the same fate. But humble Kim Sora, with her culinary talent and kind heart, was about to turn his world upside down, winning over not only the little twins, but also their father's icy heart. The wrought-iron gate of the Lee mansion opened with a soft creak, revealing a meticulously maintained garden that stretched to an imposing building of cold, modern architecture. Kim Sora, with her modest cloth bag slung over her shoulder and a crumpled resume in her hands, felt a lump in her throat. The contrast between her simplicity and the opulence before her was stark, almost humiliating. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of why she was there. The little twins who refused to eat. She was greeted by a stern-faced housekeeper who led her through silent corridors and grand rooms where every object seemed to cost a fortune. The air was heavy, imbued with a formality Sora had never experienced. Finally, she was led to a kitchen that looked like a high-tech laboratory, immaculate and lifeless. Lee Jin-woo was there, leaning against a polished marble counter, arms crossed over his chest. His posture was one of someone expecting the inevitable, a boredom disguised as impatience. His eyes, as cold as the surroundings, swept over Sora from head to toe, lingering on her simple clothes and her hair tied in an unpretentious bun. There wasn't a hint of warmth in his gaze, just a quick, dismissive assessment. "Are you Kim Sora?" he asked, his voice deep and emotionless, as if reading a name from a list. "Yes, sir, it's a pleasure to meet you," Sora replied, giving a hurried bow, feeling her face flush under his scrutiny. Jin-woo did not return the formality. He took the resume she offered, flipped through it quickly, and placed it back on the counter with a slight disdain. "Your resume is unusual. No experience in high-end gastronomy kitchens, no renowned certifications, just domestic cook with a passion for fresh ingredients." He paused, an almost imperceptible smile, laden with irony, playing on his lips. "My daughters need more than passion, Miss Kim. They need someone who understands a refined palate, who knows how to prepare dishes that stimulate them to eat." Sora felt the sting, but didn't let it deter her. "Mr. Lee, I understand my resume isn't what you expect, but I guarantee my food has soul. I know how to make children eat, not just with their stomachs, but with their hearts. I can make nutritious and delicious dishes the twins will love." Jin-woo let out a short, dry laugh. "Love. 9 cooks have tried to make the twins love the food in the past 15 days. None of them lasted more than 2. They are demanding. Very demanding, and frankly, your profile doesn't inspire confidence for this task." He gestured to the kitchen. "This isn't a neighborhood kitchen, Miss Kim. It's an environment that demands excellence." The housekeeper cleared her throat, intervening. "Sir, the agency insisted she had a different approach. Perhaps it's worth giving her a chance, considering the girl's situation." Jin-woo sighed, a gesture of resignation. "Very well, you have an hour. Prepare something. Anything you think my daughters might consider edible. But don't expect miracles, and don't worry about impressing me. My palate isn't the problem." Sora nodded, determination shining in her eyes, despite the humiliation. "Understood, sir." As Jin-woo walked away with the housekeeper following him, Sora was left alone in the vast kitchen. She could feel the weight of distrust, the implicit certainty that she would fail. But instead of being discouraged, a spark of defiance ignited within her. She didn't have the exotic ingredients or sophisticated techniques he expected, but she had something more valuable: the ability to transform simple ingredients into comfort, into memories. She opened the spacious refrigerator, full of fresh organic produce. Her eyes scanned the shelves, searching for inspiration. The twins weren't eating. Why? Perhaps it wasn't the food itself, but the lack of something deeper, Sora picked out some colorful vegetables, fresh eggs, and a bit of rice. She wouldn't make a sophisticated dish. She would make something that spoke directly to a child's soul, something that evoked warmth and home. With a subtle smile, she began to work, her movements agile and intuitive. The aroma of sautéing onions and garlic began to fill the sterile air of the kitchen, a scent that, unbeknownst to her, would begin to awaken something dormant in the Lee mansion. The battle to win over the twins, and perhaps their father's heart, had just begun. The clock on the high-tech kitchen wall ticked mercilessly, but Kim Sora didn't feel the pressure of time. She felt the pressure of an opportunity, a chance to prove that simplicity could be as powerful as sophistication. Her nimble fingers danced over the cutting board, transforming colorful carrots, zucchinis, and bell peppers into perfect little cubes. She wasn't just cutting vegetables, she was infusing them with the intention to nourish, to comfort. "It's not about what you cook, but how you cook," she murmured to herself, recalling her grandmother's lessons. "With your hands and with your heart." She decided to prepare a nutritious and colorful fried rice, but with a special touch. Instead of just mixing the ingredients, she would transform them into a small, edible work of art. First, she sautéed finely chopped garlic and onion in a drizzle of sesame oil, releasing a warm, inviting aroma that began to spread, challenging the sterile coldness of the kitchen. Next, she added the vegetables, sautéing them until tender yet still crisp, maintaining their vibrant colors. The fluffy, cooked rice was incorporated, absorbing the flavors and turning a golden hue. Finally, beaten eggs were delicately scrambled in, creating soft flakes that blended with the rice and vegetables. Sora didn't use exotic seasonings, just sea salt, a touch of soy sauce, and a pinch of sugar to balance the flavors, creating a harmony that was both familiar and surprising. She knew children were sensitive to very strong flavors. The secret was texture and presentation. While the fried rice rested, releasing its fragrance, Sora picked up a small star-shaped mold she found in a drawer. Carefully, she molded portions of the rice, creating small, colorful stars that looked like they'd come straight out of a fairy tale. Arranged on a simple white plate, the rice stars were accompanied by some shredded grilled chicken, tender and succulent, and a few fresh lettuce leaves for a touch of green. Outside in his office, Lee Jin-woo was engrossed in documents, but an unusual scent began to permeate the air. It wasn't the aroma of sophisticated dishes he was used to smelling from his kitchen, but something more, homely. A scent that, for a fleeting instant, transported him to a distant past, to his mother's kitchen. He shook his head, pushing away the intrusive memory. It must just be the new cook trying something different. He expected nothing. The housekeeper, Mrs. Park, entered the office. "Sir, Miss Kim has finished. The twins are in the dining room." Jin-woo sighed. "Very well. Let's see what she managed to create." His voice still carried a tone of skepticism. In the dining room, Minji and Minseo, two identical small figures with large, expressive eyes, sat at the enormous table, their feet dangling in the air. They looked bored, arms crossed, already anticipating the battle to come. Kim Sora entered, carrying the plates with the rice stars. Her eyes met the girls, and she gave them a gentle, warm smile. "Hello, girls. I'm Sora. I prepared something special for you today." Minji wrinkled her nose. "We're not hungry," she said, her voice small but firm. Minseo nodded in agreement. "Food is boring." Jin-woo entered the room, his eyes assessing the dish. Rice stars. He expected something more. Suitable for his home. "Miss Kim, I told you not to worry about impressing me. My daughters aren't easily fooled by pretty shapes." Sora was not intimidated. She knelt beside Minji's chair, placing the plate in front of her. "It's not to trick you, Mr. Lee. It's to invite you. Look, girls. They're magic stars. Each one has a delicious secret inside." She pointed to the colorful bits. There's carrot to make you strong, zucchini to give you energy, and eggs to make you smart. The twins looked at the plate, then at Sora, a subtle curiosity beginning to sparkle in their eyes. The housekeeper watched, surprised by Sora's direct and affectionate approach. "We don't want it," Mincio repeated, but her gaze was fixed on the stars. Sora picked up a small spoon. "How about a little bite? Just one, to taste the magic. If you don't like it, that's okay, but I promise it's magic that makes your tummy smile." Minji hesitated, looking at her father, who maintained a neutral expression but watched intently. He expected failure, but something in Sora's gentle voice prevented him from intervening. With an almost imperceptible sigh, Minji reached out and took the spoon. With a slow movement, she brought a rice star to her mouth. Her eyes widened slightly. The taste was mild, comforting, familiar, and yet delicious. She chewed slowly, savoring every bit. Mincio, seeing her sister's reaction, could no longer resist. "I want a magic star too," she exclaimed, grabbing her own spoon. A small smile, the first in a long time, began to form on Minji's lips. Kim Sora's heart filled with a silent joy. The battle to win over the twins had begun, and to everyone's surprise, the first star had already been won. Li Jinwu watched the scene, a pang of something he couldn't identify, perhaps surprise, perhaps a dormant emotion, piercing his icy chest. He watched Minji, his always reluctant daughter, chew the rice star with an expression of pure delight. The small smile forming on her lips was something he hadn't seen in months, perhaps years, since his wife's death. The soft, comforting aroma emanating from the dish seemed to envelop the dining room, a stark contrast to the usual silence and tension that hung over mealtimes. Mincio, who had declared herself not hungry moments earlier, now reached out for another star, her eyes sparkling with a childlike curiosity that Sora had managed to awaken. "It really is magic, Sora," she exclaimed, her voice full of genuine joy. "It tastes like love." Sora smiled, her heart light. "That's because it was made with a lot of love, Mincio, and with ingredients Grandma Sora always said make us strong and happy." She was referring to her own grandmother, but the word grandma seemed to resonate with the girls, creating an instant connection. Minji, who had already finished her first star, pointed to the shredded chicken. "And the chicken, is it magic too?" "Of course," Sora replied, picking up a small piece and offering it on the spoon. "It's chicken from a little dragon that gives lots of courage." The twins giggled, a sweet and melodious sound that echoed through the room, breaking the usual formality. Jinwu felt a lump in his throat. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard his daughters laugh like that at the table. He watched Sora, kneeling beside the girls, her humble posture and genuine smile contrasting with the room's opulence. She wasn't just serving food. She was serving attention, affection, a story. He approached the table, his steps firm, but his mind in a whirl. The smell of Sora's food was undeniably familiar, a distant echo of his childhood. He could almost feel the warmth of his mother's kitchen, the aroma of sautéing garlic and onion, the comfort of a simple dish, yet made with love. He shook his head, trying to push away the memory. She was just a cook, and he couldn't afford to be sentimental. "They're eating," he said, his voice lower than usual, almost a whisper. It wasn't a question, but an observation, laden with thinly veiled surprise. Sora stood, giving a brief bow. "Yes, sir. It seems the magic stars worked." Mincio, with a mouthful, looked at her father. "Dad, it's the best food ever. Can I have more?" Minji nodded vigorously, her eyes pleading. "Please, Dad, we want more stars." Jinwu looked at his daughters, then at Sora. The skepticism on his face was beginning to give way to an expression of perplexity. He had hired 9 cooks, renowned chefs, who prepared dishes worthy of Michelin-starred restaurants, and none of them had managed to elicit a smile, much less a request for more, from his daughters. And now this woman, with her unusual resume and her magic stars, had done the impossible. "Very well," he said, his voice still a little hoarse. "You can have more." He turned to Sora. "Miss Kim, it seems you succeeded." The word "succeeded" came out with the reluctance he couldn't hide. Sora merely smiled, a discreet smile, yet full of dignity. "I'm glad the girls enjoyed it, sir." The housekeeper, Mrs. Park, who had been observing everything from a corner of the room, couldn't suppress a small smile of satisfaction. She knew there was something special about Kim Sora. Jinwoo remained in the dining room, watching his daughters devour the rice stars with an appetite he hadn't seen in a long time. He didn't eat, but the aroma continued to envelop him, stubbornly evoking images of a past he had locked away. That scent, that laughter, that childlike joy. Kim Sora had brought something back to his home that he thought he had lost forever, and that both scared and intrigued him. The battle to win over the twins had been won, but the war to win over their father's heart, and perhaps his own, was just beginning. He felt a strange warmth spread in his chest, a warmth he didn't know if he wanted or could allow. Lee Jinwoo remained in the dining room, his eyes fixed on his daughters who, for the first time in a long time, were eating with a voracious appetite. The warmth spreading in his chest was a strange, almost unsettling sensation. It was as if a door he had kept locked for years was being gently pushed open. He tried to rationalize. It was just food. The children were hungry, but the laughter, the genuine joy emanating from them, couldn't be explained by hunger alone. It was Kim Sora's presence, her gentle voice, the way she had knelt and spoken to them, that had broken the barrier. He watched Sora collect the empty plates, a discreet smile on her lips. She showed no pride, just a quiet satisfaction. "I'm glad the girls enjoyed it, sir," she said, her voice calm. Min-ji and Min-seo, with full bellies and still bright faces, ran to Sora, hugging her legs. "Sora, are you coming back tomorrow?" "We want more magic stars," Min-seo asked, her eyes sparkling. Sora knelt down, stroking Minji's hair. "Of course, my little stars. Sora will come back and prepare many other delicious things for you." Jinwoo cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "Girls, behave. Miss Kim has her duties." He didn't want Sora to feel overwhelmed, but he also didn't want his daughters to get too attached to someone he still viewed as a temporary employee. However, the way the girls pulled away from Sora with a small pout made something clench in his chest. As Sora headed to the kitchen, Mrs. Park approached Jinwoo. "Sir, Miss Kim truly has a gift. I've never seen the girls eat like this." Jinwoo merely nodded, his mind still trying to process. "Yes, Mrs. Park, it seems so." He turned to his office, but the lingering aroma of garlic, onion, and sesame seemed to follow him, an olfactory memory that refused to fade. In the kitchen, Sora washed the dishes, feeling a slight exhaustion, but also deep satisfaction. She knew the battle was far from over, but the first victory filled her with hope. Meanwhile, the mansion's main door opened. Choi Yu-ra, impeccably dressed, and her mother, Mrs. Choi, entered, their heels echoing on the polished marble. They had just arrived from a charity event. "Jinwoo, darling, we're here," Yu-ra announced, her voice melodious, yet with a demanding tone. Jinwoo emerged from his office, his expression returning to its usual coldness. "Yu-ra, Mrs. Choi?" "Welcome. And where are the girls?" Mrs. Choi asked, looking around. "Have they had dinner yet?" Min-ji and Min-seo, who were playing in the living room, heard the voices and appeared. "Grandma Choi, Aunt Yu-ra," they said without their previous enthusiasm. Yu-ra knelt to hug them, noticing something different. "My little ones, you're full of energy. Did you eat well today?" Min-seo nodded vigorously. "Yes, Sora made magic stars. They were delicious." Minji added, "They were the best, with little dragon chicken." They exchanged glances. Magic stars, little dragon chicken. They exchanged glances, a pang of suspicion rising in their eyes. Mrs. Choi, with her shrewd gaze, noticed the sparkle in her granddaughter's eyes, something she hadn't seen in a long time. "Sora?" Yura asked Jin Woo with a slight frown. "Who is Sora?" Jin Woo, who was observing the scene, felt a slight discomfort. "She's the new cook, Kim Sora." "Ah, yes, the one Mrs. Park insisted on hiring," Yura said, with a tone that suggested the housekeeper's insistence was a mistake. "I imagined she wouldn't last long. What did she prepare? Something simple, I suppose." She cast a disdainful glance towards the kitchen, as if the scent still lingering in the air was somehow inferior. Mrs. Choi, always more calculating, observed Jin Woo's face. He seemed less tense, and the girls were different. "It seems she managed to get the girls to eat," Jin Woo replied, his voice neutral, but with a slight inflection of surprise that didn't escape Yura's notice. "Managed?" Yura repeated, her smile becoming a little forced. "Well, it's a start, I suppose. But Jin Woo, you know we need someone who fits our household standards, someone who can prepare dishes for our important dinners, not just magic stars." She emphasized the last words with a subtle mocking tone. Jin Woo felt a pang of irritation, but ignored it. "The priorities are the girls, Yura, and she seems to be achieving the objective." He turned to Mrs. Park. "Mrs. Park, please ask Miss Kim to come to my office tomorrow morning. I have some questions." Yura and her mother exchanged another look, this time more laden with concern. The magic stars had worked, and Jin Woo was interested. That humble cook, with her rejected resume, was beginning to infiltrate, and that was a threat they couldn't allow. In the privacy of his office, Jin Woo sat down, the scent of Sora's food still in his nostrils. He picked up the phone and dialed Mrs. Park. "Mrs. Park, please arrange for Miss Kim to prepare lunch and dinner for the girls as well. And, ask her to prepare something for me too, something simple, what she made for the girls today." He hung up before Mrs. Park could reply, feeling a slight flush on his cheeks. He didn't know why he was doing this, but the curiosity and that strange warmth were irresistible. The silent war in the Lee mansion had just gained a new and unexpected battlefield. The next morning at the Lee mansion dawned with a different quietness. Kim Sora, after a restless night's sleep, woke with the feeling that something had changed. CEO Lee Jin-woo's request for her to prepare his meal echoed in her mind. Something simple, what she made for the girls today. The simplicity of the request, coming from such a complex and distant man, intrigued her. It wasn't just cooking, it was a door opening, a crack of curiosity from someone who seemed to have closed all of his. In the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the morning breeze. Sora began preparing the twins' breakfast. For Minji and Minseo, she made fluffy pancakes shaped like teddy bears and hearts, decorated with fresh fruit and a drizzle of honey. For Jin-woo, she decided to stick to the comfort theme, a soft and nutritious Korean rice porridge, juk, with a touch of shredded chicken and finely chopped vegetables, accompanied by some simple yet flavorful banchan, side dishes, like white kimchi and sautéed spinach. It was the essence of home cooking, something she imagined was rare in a CEO's life. When the twins came down for breakfast, their eyes lit up at the sight of the teddy bears and hearts on the plate. "Sora, how pretty!" Minji exclaimed, picking up a piece. Minseo, more practical, was already savoring her pancake. Jin-woo, who joined them at the table, observed the scene. The genuine smile on his daughters' faces was a sight he hadn't seen in years. His gaze then fell upon the bowl of porridge in front of him. It was simple, yes, but the aroma was inviting, and the presentation, though modest, was thoughtful. He picked up the spoon, hesitating for a moment. It was the first time he had eaten something prepared by Sora, something not meant for his daughters. The first spoonful was a surprise. The taste was delicate yet profound, with a richness that warmed both stomach and soul. It was his mother's food. The memory came like a flash, quick and intense, a long-forgotten yet unmistakable taste. He saw himself, a child sitting at the table, as his mother served him a similar porridge when he was sick. A pang of melancholy and a strange warmth spread through his chest. Yura and Mrs. Choi, who had come down for breakfast, watched the scene with growing apprehension. Yura, with her espresso in hand, frowned upon seeing Jinwoo eating the porridge. "Jinwoo, darling, are you eating that? Isn't it a little too simple for you?" Jinwoo looked up, his expression impassive, but there was a different glint in his eyes. "It's nutritious, and the girls are eating well." He didn't defend the food, but he didn't criticize it either, which for Yura was almost worse. Mrs. Choi, always more astute, noticed the subtle change in Jinwoo's demeanor. He wasn't just eating, he was savoring it, and most disturbingly, he seemed at peace. After breakfast, Jinwoo retreated to his office. Mrs. Park approached Sora. "Miss Kim, the CEO wishes to see you in his office now." Sora felt a chill in her stomach. It was time. She adjusted her clean apron and followed Mrs. Park to the imposing door of Jinwoo's office. He was sitting at his desk, the morning light filtering through the windows, illuminating his serious profile. "Miss Kim, please sit," he said, indicating the chair in front of him. Sora sat down, her hands clasped in her lap, her heart beating a little faster. "Sir." Jinwoo observed her for a moment, his eyes dark and intense. "The girls are eating, that's a fact, and they seem happy." He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "What do you do differently, Miss Kim?" Sora took a deep breath. "Sir, I just listen. I listen to what they like, what makes them smile, and I try to put a little love into every dish. Food for me is a form of love." Jinwoo stared at her, an unreadable expression on his face. Love. It was a word he rarely associated with his life, much less with food. "And today's porridge?" he asked, his voice softer. "Why did you choose that for me?" Sora hesitated, surprised by the direct question. I imagined you needed something comforting, something that reminded you of home, perhaps, something simple as you requested." She didn't mention his mother, as she didn't know about the connection, but intuition had guided her. A silence filled the room. Jinwoo leaned back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Sora. Her simplicity and honesty were disarming. He felt the barrier in his heart yield a little more. "I understand," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "Keep up the good work, Miss Kim. And prepare lunch and dinner for me, too. What you would make for the girls." Sora nodded, a subtle relief permeating her body. "Yes, sir." As she left the office, Sora felt the weight of a new challenge, but also a sense of recognition. Jinwoo hadn't dismissed her. He had asked for more. The silent war was just beginning, but Sora had a secret weapon, food that spoke to the heart. And Jinwoo, unknowingly, was beginning to listen. Sora dedicated herself to the new task with the same passion she put into every dish. For Jinwoo's lunch and dinner, she chose dishes that, though traditional, were prepared with a touch of lightness and freshness. A colorful and nutritious bibimbap for lunch, and delicately marinated bulgogi with japchae for dinner. Each meal was a silent attempt to connect, to offer comfort and nourishment to a man who seemed to have forgotten what it was like to be cared for. Jinwoo, in turn, continued to eat in silence, but the change in his demeanor was undeniable. The tension in his shoulders seemed to lessen, and his eyes, once so cold, now held a glint of contemplation. He didn't openly praise her, but the fact that he cleared his plate at every meal was a compliment in itself. Mrs. Park, observing him from afar, noticed the transformation. CEO Lee Jin-woo was, for the first time in years, truly enjoying his meals. Sora's growing closeness with the twins was also evident. On a sunny afternoon, while Sora prepared a snack of fresh fruit and homemade cookies, Min-ji and Min-seo hugged her, their faces radiant. "Sora, you're the best cook in the world," Min-ji exclaimed. Min-seo, more timid, simply squeezed Sora's hand, a genuine smile on her face. The scene was witnessed by Yu-ra, who was coming down the stairs, and by Mrs. Choi, who was already in the living room. The intimacy between Sora and the twins was palpable, and Yu-ra's envy became almost unbearable. Later, in Yu-ra's room, Mrs. Choi confronted her, her voice low and laden with urgency. "Yu-ra, don't you realize what's happening? That cook is infiltrating Jin-woo's and the girls' lives. He's never eaten with such appetite, never been so calm." Yu-ra threw her designer bag onto the bed, her eyes flashing. "I know, Mother. It's ridiculous. She's a nobody, a simple street cook. How can she be competing with me? She has no pedigree, no connections." "It's not a fair competition, darling," Mrs. Choi said, stroking her daughter's hair with a calculating gesture. "She's using food to manipulate his emotions, and the girls. They're completely enchanted by her. That woman is a real threat to your future." "We need to do something," Yu-ra declared, her voice choked with anger. "I can't let a woman like her ruin everything we've built." Mrs. Choi smiled coldly, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "Exactly, but we can't be obvious. Jin-woo is an intelligent man. We need a plan that irremediably disqualifies her, that exposes her true nature and removes her from this house forever." "But how?" Yu-ra asked eagerly, her eyes fixed on her mother. "Leave it to me," Mrs. Choi replied, her voice filled with dark certainty. "Soon there will be the business dinner with the shareholders of Lee Corporation, a perfect opportunity to show Jin-woo that Miss Kim is not worthy of being in this house, much less of cooking for him or his daughters." Yu-ra smiled, a shadow of cruelty on her face. "Yes, Mother, a perfect opportunity." The date of the business dinner with the Lee Corporation shareholders was approaching, and the tension in the mansion was almost palpable. Kim Sora, oblivious to Yu-ra's and her mother's machinations, dedicated herself diligently to the preparations. She knew it was a crucial opportunity for Jin-woo, and she wanted the food to reflect the excellence of the household, but with her personal touch of warmth. For the event, Sora planned a menu that blended the required sophistication with the soul of Korean cuisine. The main course would be galbi jjim, braised beef short ribs, but prepared with a secret sauce from her grandmother, which made it incredibly tender and flavorful, and accompanied by seafood jeon, Korean pancakes, light and crispy. She spent hours in the kitchen, selecting the best ingredients, marinating the meat to perfection, and testing every detail. Meanwhile, Yu-ra and Mrs. Choi watched Sora's every move, weaving their web of intrigue. Mrs. Choi had bribed one of the maids to gain access to the kitchen when Sora wasn't present. On the afternoon of the dinner, Sora was finalizing the galbi jjim. The sweet and savory aroma filled the kitchen. She had prepared a large quantity of the special sauce and left it in a separate container to be added at the last moment, ensuring its freshness. She just needed a few minutes to go to her room to get a special seasoning. It was during this brief interval that Mrs. Choi acted. With the complicit maid distracting Mrs. Park, she entered the kitchen. Quickly, she swapped Sora's secret sauce container for another, identical one, but containing a generic and excessively salty sauce with a bitter note. It was a subtle sabotage, but one that would destroy the balance of the main dish. She also ensured that some of the john were slightly burnt to give the impression of carelessness. When Sora returned, she didn't notice the swap. Believing everything was in order, she added the secret sauce to the galbi jim, finishing the dish with a smile of satisfaction. The guests began to arrive. The dining room was immaculate, elegantly decorated. Li Jinwu, in his dark suit, greeted the shareholders with his usual reserved demeanor, but there was a subtle expectation in his gaze. Yura, stunning in a designer dress, circulated among the guests, exuding confidence and posing as the perfect hostess. Mrs. Choi, by her side, watched everything with a victorious smile. The dinner began with appetizers and starters that Sora had masterfully prepared, receiving discreet compliments from the guests. Yura, however, barely touched the food, awaiting the moment of her attack. When the galbi jim was served, a murmur of admiration swept through the table. The presentation was impeccable. Sora, who was supervising the kitchen, felt a mix of pride and nervousness. Yura took a piece of the meat, bringing it to her mouth with an expression of forced anticipation. The instant the sauce touched her tongue, her expression changed to one of exaggerated disgust. She coughed discreetly, covering her mouth with her hand. "Oh, heavens!" she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to attract everyone's attention. "Jinwu, darling, what is this? This sauce is inedible, excessively salty and with a strange taste." She looked at the guests, who were beginning to taste the dish, some with confused expressions. "It's a shame. Galbi jim is such a noble dish, but this sauce, it seems to have been made with poor quality ingredients, or perhaps by someone without the proper training for a dinner of this importance." Mrs. Choi intervened with a tone of feigned concern. "My dear, don't be so harsh. Miss Kim is a simple cook, perhaps not accustomed to the standards of a corporate dinner. She does what she can with what she has." The insinuation about Sora's humble origins was clear. The shareholders began to whisper, some discreetly pushing their plates away. Sora, who had entered the room to check on the service, felt her blood run cold. She had tasted the sauce before adding it, and it was perfect. Her heart pounded as she saw the disappointment on the guests' faces. Jinwu, who until then had been observing the scene with an indecipherable expression, picked up his spoon and tasted the galbi jim. His eyes narrowed. The taste was indeed different, unbalanced. He looked at Sora, who was pale, and then at Yura, who was smiling victoriously. A tense silence hung over the table. Everyone awaited the CEO's reaction. Yura was certain Sora would be fired on the spot, but Jinwu didn't do what everyone expected. He calmly put down his spoon, his gaze fixed on Yura, and then swept the table, meeting the eyes of each shareholder. "Indeed, the sauce is different from what I expected," he began, his voice low but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. "However, the galbi jim itself, the meat, the way it was prepared, is impeccable, and the gion are delicious." He paused, and then his gaze fixed on Sora, who watched him with tear-filled eyes. "Miss Kim Sora," Jinwu continued, his voice gaining strength, "is the most talented cook I've ever had in this house. Her food is not just delicious, it has the rare ability to nourish not only the body, but also the soul. She brought back the appetite to my daughters, who refused to eat. She brought warmth and joy to this house, something I hadn't seen in years." He turned to Yura, his gaze intense and cold. "And, to be clear, Miss Choi, Miss Kim and her food are the only ones capable of bringing that warmth and joy to my home and to my daughters' hearts." Jinwu's declaration hit Yura like a slap. Her smile froze, replaced by an expression of shock and humiliation. Mrs. Choi paled. The shareholders exchanged glances, surprised by the CEO's passionate defense. Sora felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief and overwhelming emotion. He had defended her publicly, and with those words, he not only praised her food, but recognized its impact on his life and his daughters' lives. It was a recognition that went far beyond culinary art, a glimpse of a feeling he himself perhaps didn't yet fully understand. The dinner continued in a different atmosphere. The galbijim sauce was discreetly replaced, and Sora's other dishes were praised with more fervor. But the true meal of the night had been Jinwoo's declaration. The silent war had become open, and for the first time, Sora felt she wasn't alone. CEO Lee Jinwoo had finally begun to listen, not just with his palate, but with his heart. The lingering silence in the dining room was broken only by the clinking of cutlery, now used with an almost reverent caution. Lee Jinwoo's declaration had transformed the atmosphere from a formal dinner to a stage of personal drama. Yura, her face pale and lips trembling, barely managed to disguise her humiliation. Mrs. Choi, in turn, tried to compose herself, forcing a smile that didn't reach her icy eyes. Sora, still in shock, felt Jinwoo's gaze on her, a gaze that promised more than words could express. The evening ended abruptly. The shareholders, visibly uncomfortable, found excuses to leave early. As soon as the last car left the mansion, a heavy silence descended upon the house, foreshadowing a storm. In Yura's room, fury erupted. She hurled a flower vase against the wall, the shards scattering across the floor like her shattered dignity. "I don't believe it!" she shrieked, tears streaming down her made-up face. "He humiliated me, in front of everyone, because of that." Street cook. Mrs. Choi, sitting on the edge of the bed, watched her daughter with a mixture of anger and despair. "Calm down, Yura. You need to compose yourself." "Compose myself?" Yura laughed hysterically. "He said she brings warmth and joy. He said she's the only one. What does that mean, Mother? That I'm not enough? That all our effort was in vain?" "No, darling, it's not that." Mrs. Choi tried to soothe her, though her own voice was strained. "He's confused. That woman is using food to manipulate him. It's a cheap trick, but effective with a man who lost his mother so early." "So what do we do?" Yura asked, her voice choked, but a dangerous glint in her eyes. "I can't lose Jinwoo to her, not after everything." Mrs. Choi stood up, her face hardened. "We won't lose. This was a lost battle, but the war isn't over yet. We need a plan that truly destroys her, that makes her flee this house with her tail between her legs, something Jinwoo cannot defend." Meanwhile, in her small room, Sora sat on her bed, still processing the night's events. Jinwoo's words echoed in her mind. She brought warmth and joy to this house, the only one capable of bringing that warmth and joy to my daughters' hearts. It was a defense, yes, but it was also a confession, a recognition that both scared and warmed her. She had felt his gaze, the intensity, the raw emotion. It wasn't just about the food, it was about her. A knot formed in her stomach. She knew Yura's and her mother's fury would be relentless now. But, for the first time, she didn't feel completely alone. That look, those words, they had planted a seed of hope and perhaps of something deeper in her heart. Upstairs, Lee Jinwoo was in his office, his tie loosened and an untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. He gazed out the dark window, his mind in a whirl. Why had he said that? Why had he exposed himself in that way? The truth was, he could no longer deny what he felt, Sora's presence, the aroma of her food, the girl's laughter. Everything had transformed his monotonous and cold life. He remembered Sora's pale face, the surprise and gratitude in her eyes, and Yura's face, distorted by anger and humiliation. He knew he had crossed a line. His engagement to Yura was a business arrangement, a social convenience. But what he felt for Sora, it was something real, something he hadn't experienced since his mother's death. It was the warmth he had declared. The next morning, the mansion was enveloped in a palpable tension. Yu Ra came down for breakfast with a rigid posture, avoiding Jin Woo's gaze. Mrs. Choi accompanied her, her eyes casting sharp glances towards the kitchen. Sora, despite her nervousness, prepared breakfast as usual. The twins, oblivious to the adult drama, ran to the kitchen as soon as they smelled pancakes. "Good morning, Sora!" Minji exclaimed, hugging her legs. Minseo merely smiled, holding a drawing she had made for her. Jinwoo entered the dining room, and his eyes met Sora's for a brief instant. There was an unspoken question, a silent promise. He sat at the table watching his daughters devour Sora's pancakes. The smile on their faces was genuine, and a warmth spread through Jinwoo's chest. He knew he had made the right choice. Yu Ra, unable to bear the scene, stood up abruptly. "Jinwoo, I need to talk to you about our wedding preparations," she said, her voice strained. It was a desperate attempt to reassert her place. Jinwoo looked at her, then at Sora, who now watched the interaction with an apprehensive expression. "Not now, Yu Ra," he replied, his voice calm, but with a firmness that allowed no argument. "I'm busy, and the girls are eating." The public rejection, even if subtle, was another blow to Yu Ra. She clenched her fists, anger boiling. Mrs. Choi, by her side, squeezed her arm, a silent warning. The war had indeed become open, and Lee Jinwoo had made it clear whose side he was on, at least in his heart. Sora felt a shiver. Jinwoo's protection was a balm, but also a sentence. She was now at the center of a battle she hadn't asked for. As soon as Yu Ra and Mrs. Choi withdrew from the dining room, the tension transformed into a charged silence. The twins, oblivious to the gravity of the situation, continued to laugh and chat, their faces smeared with pancake syrup. Jinwoo watched them with a soft smile, but his eyes, as they met Sora's, held a depth that made her hold her breath. "Sora," he said, his voice low but firm, "you can take the girls to the garden after they finish. I need to talk to you." The request wasn't a question. It was a statement. Sora nodded, her heart pounding. She knew the conversation would be inevitable, but the fear of what was to come mingled with a strange anticipation. Minutes later, the girls went to the garden, and Sora returned to the dining room, where Jinwoo awaited her. He stood looking out the window, the morning light illuminating his profile. "About what happened last night," he began without turning. "I know the source was sabotaged." Sora felt a shock. "Mr. Lee, He finally turned, his eyes fixed on hers. "You don't need to say anything. I know, and I know who it was." His lips pressed into a thin line. "What I said yesterday, Sora. It wasn't just to defend you. It was the truth." Sora felt her cheeks flush. I appreciate your defense, Mr. Lee, but..." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "This will only make things worse with Miss Choi. She and Mrs. Choi won't stop." Jinwoo took a step towards her. "I know, and I'm prepared for it." He stopped at a respectful distance, but the intensity of his gaze was undeniable. "Sora, you brought something to this house that I had forgotten existed. My daughters are happy, and I am too." It was a veiled, yet clear confession. Sora felt a lump in her throat. "Mr. Lee, I'm just the cook. My place here." "Your place here is irreplaceable," he interrupted her, his voice softer, but with an unwavering conviction. "It's not just about the food, Sora. It's about the person you are, the joy you radiate." He extended his hand, hesitant, but lowered it before touching her. "I won't allow anyone to hurt you or drive you away from this house." Jinwoo's words were powerful, but also terrifying. Sora knew he was putting himself in an impossible position, challenging his own engagement and the power of the Choi family. She felt a mixture of gratitude and panic. Meanwhile, in Yura's room, Mrs. Choi stood, her hands crossed, watching her daughter pace back and forth. He defended her. He defended her again, Yura repeated, her voice choked with anger. And now he refuses to talk about the wedding. He's rejecting me, mother. Calm down, Yura, Mrs. Choi said, her voice cold and calculating. He's blinded by this woman, but blindness can be cured, or in this case the cause of the blindness can be removed. What do you mean? We can no longer attack her through food, Mrs. Choi pondered. That only makes her stronger in his eyes. We need something that completely disqualifies her, something Jinwoo cannot defend, no matter how much he wants to. She smiled, a smile devoid of warmth. Something that attacks her reputation, her morals, something that makes her seem unworthy of even stepping foot in this house. Yura felt a shiver of satisfaction. What do you have in mind? Mrs. Choi walked to the window, looking at the garden where the twins were playing, supervised by Sora. Jinwoo is a businessman, Yura. He values image and stability. If we can show that Miss Kim Sora isn't who he thinks she is, that she has a shall we say, complicated past, or that she's using his daughters for her own ends. But she doesn't have a complicated past, Yura retorted, frustrated. She's just a poor cook. Poor people have secrets too, darling, Mrs. Choi said, turning to her daughter. And if they don't, we can create them. Or better yet, we can expose the true nature of her ambition. That cooking test. The rejected resume. There's a story there we can twist. We can make it seem like she infiltrated here with ulterior motives, that she's manipulating the children to get to Jinwoo and his fortune. Yura began to smile. Yes, that's perfect. He can't defend an opportunist. Exactly, Mrs. Choi agreed, a dangerous glint in her eyes. We'll investigate every detail of her life, every step she took to get here, and then we'll expose everything in a way that he'll have no choice but to dismiss her and distance himself from her forever. The war had escalated to a new, darker, and more personal level. Sora, oblivious to the unfolding plot, felt the weight of Jinwoo's gaze, the implicit promise in his words. She knew the storm was just beginning, and that her stay in that house and the nascent feeling beginning to blossom between her and Jinwoo would be tested in ways she never imagined. The gardener's revelation resonated in Sora's mind like an alarm bell. Strange questions about your family, about your past. The man's voice echoed, confirming her worst fears. Mrs. Choi wasn't wasting any time. The war had, indeed, escalated to a new, darker, and more personal level. Sora felt a chill run down her spine, but forced a smile for the twins, who continued to play innocently in the garden. She watched them, their small faces full of joy and carefree innocence, and a new wave of determination washed over her. It wasn't just for herself, but for them, for the peace and warmth she had brought to this house, and which the girls deserved. Later, as she prepared dinner, Sora felt Jinwoo's eyes on her. He stood at the kitchen entrance, watching her with an intensity that made her blush. "Sora," he said, his voice low, "you seem thoughtful." She hesitated, unsure if she should share her concern with him, but his gaze was one of genuine concern. "Mr. Lee, the gardener told me someone was asking questions about me in the village, about my past." Jinwoo's jaw tightened. A cold glint appeared in his eyes. "I imagined it wouldn't take long. Don't worry, Sora, I'll handle it." "But how?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "They'll dig until they find something or invent something. My life is simple, but they are powerful." Jinwoo took a step towards her, stopping near the counter. "I am more powerful, Sora, and I won't allow them to use you to manipulate me or to hurt my daughters." He extended his hand, and this time his fingers gently brushed hers, a quick touch, yet laden with meaning. "Trust me." The touch sent a shiver through Sora, a mixture of fear and a strange sense of security. She nodded, her heart pounding. The trust he placed in her was a burden, but also a strength. Upstairs, Mrs. Choi was reviewing the first reports from the private investigator. She smiled coldly as she read about Sora's humble childhood, the absence of a father, the hard-working mother, the financial difficulties. "No obvious scandals, Yura," she said, tossing the papers onto the table. "But her simplicity is our weapon." Yura, sitting at her vanity, applied a vibrant red lipstick. "What do you mean, mother?" "Jinwoo is a man who values image and stability. We can paint Miss Kim as a calculating opportunist, someone who saw the Lee mansion as her only chance for social climbing, that her simplicity is a facade for boundless ambition, and that she's using the children to infiltrate his life." Mrs. Choi picked up a photo of Sora, discreetly taken in the garden with the twins. "See how she clings to them. It's an old trick. Win over the children to win over the father and his fortune." "But the girls really like her," Yura argued, her voice laden with envy. "That only makes the story more convincing to the public." "Mrs. Choi retorted, her smile widening, "will leak information about the rejected resume, about how she insisted on the test. We'll suggest she's a gold digger, a manipulator who took advantage of Jinwoo's and the children's vulnerability, and we'll do it at a time when he can't defend her without looking like a lovesick fool." Yura turned, her eyes gleaming with dark satisfaction. At the Lee Foundation's gala dinner next week," Mrs. Choi declared, her voice full of triumph. "All eyes will be on Jinwoo and you, his fiancée. It will be the perfect stage to expose the true nature of his cook." She looked at her daughter, a dangerous glint in her eyes, and to remind him who he truly should have by his side. Meanwhile, Sora felt a strange unease. The mansion seemed colder, the staff's glances more curious. She knew the calm was just the prelude to the storm. Jinwoo's promise was a shield, but she sensed the attack would come from a direction even he couldn't foresee. The Lee Foundation's gala dinner was approaching, and with it, the certainty that the truth, or the version of it that Mrs. Choi and Yura would create, would be revealed. Sora knew her life was about to be turned upside down, and that the battle for her place in that house and in Jinwoo's heart was just beginning. The night of the Lee Foundation's gala dinner arrived, bringing with it an aura of expectation and tension. The mansion, adorned with twinkling lights and exuberant floral arrangements, buzzed with Seoul's elite. Sora, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown that Jinwoo had insisted she wear. "You are part of this household, Sora, and you deserve to shine," felt her heart pound. She was backstage, overseeing the final kitchen details, although most of the dishes were served by an external catering service for the formal event. Jinwoo found her in the kitchen, his dark eyes sweeping over her with an intensity that made her hold her breath. He was impeccable in his tuxedo, exuding a calm authority. "Is everything all right, Sora?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. She nodded, but her unease was palpable. "I'm a little nervous, Mr. Lee." He took a step forward, and this time he didn't hesitate to touch her arm, a firm and comforting gesture. "There's nothing to fear. I'm here." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Sora felt a strange strength, a silent promise of protection. In the main hall, Mrs. Choi and Yura circulated with calculated smiles, greeting guests. Yura, stunning in a designer gown, kept Jinwoo by her side, posing for photos, the image of the perfect fiancé. But her eyes, every now and then, darted towards the kitchen door, a dangerous glint of anticipation in them. The moment Mrs. Choi awaited arrived during Jinwoo's speech about the Foundation's future projects. When he finished and the applause subsided, Mrs. Choi, with false modesty, asked for the floor. "Mr. Lee, before the evening progresses, I would like to make a small observation. It is about the importance of integrity and transparency in all areas of our lives, especially when it comes to people who infiltrate circles of trust." A murmur swept through the hall. Jin Woo, standing beside Yura, felt a chill run down his spine. He knew what was coming. Mrs. Choi gestured to one of the waiters, who brought a folder. "Recently, we uncovered some disturbing information about a certain employee of the Lee Mansion, a cook, Miss Kim Sora, who, despite her humble origins, seems to possess, shall we say, boundless ambition." She opened the folder, revealing copies of Sora's rejected resume and reports from the private investigator. She presented herself for a test with a resume that would barely pass screening and insisted on an opportunity, using Mr. Lee's daughters as a means to enter this house. Yura's eyes gleamed with triumph. It's regrettable that such calculating individuals try to take advantage of a family's kindness and vulnerability, especially that of children, to climb socially, a gold digger in essence. Sora, who had been called to the hall under the pretext of a kitchen emergency, stood at the entrance, pale, listening to every word. The guests' disdainful glances hit her like knives. She felt the ground fall away beneath her feet. Jin Woo, however, didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his voice resonating through the hall, cutting through the gossipy air. "Mrs. Choi, Miss Choi, your accusations are not only unfounded, but also deeply offensive." He turned to the crowd, his posture imposing. "Miss Kim Sora did not infiltrate this house. She was hired by me for her undeniable talent and, more importantly, for her kindness and character." He walked to where Sora stood, extending his hand to her. "Sora, come here." Sora hesitantly took his hand. Feeling the warmth and strength that coursed through her, he pulled her to the center of the hall by his side. "This woman," Jin Woo continued, his voice now laden with an emotion that surprised everyone, "brought light and joy to this house that I had forgotten existed. She fed my daughters not just with food, but with love and affection. She reminded me what it's like to have a real home." He looked at Sora, and his eyes, once cold and distant, now shone with undeniable tenderness. "I love you, Sora, and I will not allow anyone, not even my fiancée of convenience or her mother, to try and tarnish your name or drive you away from me and my daughters." A shocked silence fell over the hall. Yura was livid, her mouth agape in disbelief. Mrs. Choi, for the first time, seemed to have lost her composure, her face contorted in fury. Jin Woo turned to Yura, his voice firm and without regret. "Our engagement is over, Miss Choi. I cannot marry someone who tries to destroy the person who brought true happiness into my life." Yura, publicly humiliated, let out a cry of rage and ran out of the hall, followed by her mother, who cast a look of deadly hatred at Sora and Jin Woo. The guests began to whisper, some shocked, others admiring Jin Woo's audacity. But he didn't care. He held Sora's hand tighter, and she felt a wave of relief and love wash over her. "Mr. Lee," she began, tears in her eyes. "Jin Woo," he corrected her, a soft smile gracing his lips. "Please, call me Jin Woo." He leaned in, and in a gesture that sealed their fate, he gently kissed her forehead, ignoring the curious glances. "You are the only one I want by my side, you and the girls." That night, under the lights of the Lee Mansion, Kim Sora, the humble cook, found not just a place but a home and a love she never dared to dream of. The storm had passed, and the warmth of a new beginning filled the air, promising a future where simplicity and true love would reign.